After a year of trying to have his filibuster and bypass it too, Joe Biden is calling out the Senate to take action now on one of the most important issues of his presidency, voting rights.
I've been having these quiet conversations with the members of Congress for the last 2 months. I'm tired of being quiet. I believe that the threat to our democracy is so grave that we must find a way to pass these voting rights bills. Debate them, vote, let the majority prevail. And if that bare minimum is blocked, we have no option but to change the Senate rules, including getting rid of the filibuster for this.
Biden plans to meet with Senate Democrats tomorrow to come up with a game plan for all of this, with many on the left growing increasingly frustrated about the inaction on this issue. Among them, activist groups like the Black Voters Matter Fund and the New Georgia Project Action Fund, members of which skipped last night's event, calling for action rather than speeches. Then there are the 24 faith leaders who've been on a hunger strike since January 6th, including Harvard's Cornell William Brooks, who joined us on Monday, and many progressive lawmakers in Congress, including Massachusetts' own Ayanna Pressley, who joined us today on Boston Public Radio.
Failure is not an option, so it's simply, it can't be a loss.
Unfortunately, it can be, because assuming real action on this requires nixing the filibuster, a so-called carve-out for this legislation, so that a simple majority rather than the usual 60 votes can make this happen, that's no easy feat either. Since every Republican and 2 Senate Democrats, Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, remain opposed, which leaves advocates for electoral reform 2 votes short.
The filibuster is what makes the Senate hopefully work when it's supposed to work.
But clearly it is not working, and that's the problem. And even if Democrats succeed in eliminating the filibuster, Senate Leader Mitch McConnell is indicating he has plenty more up his sleeve to keep the wheels of progress from turning.
What would a post-nuclear Senate look like? I assure you it would not be more efficient or more productive. I personally guarantee it. Do my colleagues understand how many times per day the Senate needs and gets unanimous consent for basic housekeeping? Do they understand how many things would require roll call votes?
Well, that's promising from a guy who wouldn't hold a hearing on an Obama Supreme Court nominee, Merrick Garland, 8 months before an election, but rushed to confirm a Trump nominee, Amy Coney Barrett, when voting had already started. I'm joined by the co-founder of one of the groups that boycotted Biden's speech and which helped give Democrats control of the Senate, theoretically at least, last year, LaTosha Brown of the Black Voters Matter Fund. It's been a long time, LaTosha. It's great to see you again.
Thank you for having me, Jim. Glad to be here.
Why'd you participate in the boycott of Biden and Harris yesterday?
You know, part of what we wanted is our goal wasn't to be antagonistic or combative, but it was to send a clear message that this was a critical issue for us and that we were interested in no longer just hearing a speech. We felt like the time had passed for that, has long gone since we're at the point of speeches, and that we needed action. And that many of the things that the president was good to hear, I thought it was a good speech. It was good to hear the president really reiterate some of the things that we've been talking about for the last year. We have been begging the president to consider a carve out of the filibuster. We have been begging the president to actually use the fullness of his power as president to put pressure on Manchin, Sinema, and any other senators to really be able to make sure that we get this legislation. We've been begging the president to make this a priority. And so it was good to see him at least acknowledge that he's been silent on this issue, which is part of the reason why we wanted to make sure yesterday that our presence, that we were not trying to be disruptive to the meeting, but we wanted to do is to send a clear message that this was not the time for speeches. This is the time for real work and deliverables.
What does he do, though, to convince the Manchins and the Sinema that he hasn't already tried to do?
You know, I mean, I think that there's a number of things that even about his own account. He said that I've been having silent conversations with members or whatever. Many of us have always felt that he could use the public framework and the momentum of the public. Matter of fact, I actually believe that had he given this speech a year ago, when there was the momentum of the election, that if he had given this speech a year ago before there was a passage of the infrastructure bill, they would have had more leverage. But the fact remains that, yes, we are here where we are right now. And so what we're saying is a president who ran on the fact that he had actually served in the Senate for 4 decades. If there's anyone And he has been very vocal about that knows how to use the Senate rules, and knows how to put pressure and how the Senate works. It's him. You know, even yesterday in his speech, he referred to, he was able to move Strom Thurmond. So I'm just interested in whatever, if it took to move Strom Thurmond, who was a notable open racist, then could those particular tactics also be used to other senators that are in the U.S. Senate?
You know, speaking of known racists who have served in the Senate, you've used the term carve-out, which, you know, an exception to the filibuster, which would allow this to happen with 50 votes plus Kamala Harris, which is all that Joe Biden is looking for. People like Ayanna Pressley, who, as I said, was on our radio show today, see the whole filibuster as she said, as a relic of Jim Crow. Does the whole filibuster have to go, or are you just focused on this piece of legislation?
No, at this moment, we're dealing with, I'm being pragmatic. At this moment, what we are calling for is we want to get this legislation passed. And we know that we can't do that if there is not a filibuster. And we know that the more likely, the likelihood of some of the senators actually receiving it is if there is a carve out at this particular moment. But yes, the filibuster itself is a relic of the past, and it has been used and weaponized in a way to stop and slow down civil rights and voting rights legislation historically. You know, we also, but I think there's even a deeper issue. More than just saying that we've got to get rid of the filibuster, we have to really be honest about how we need structural change for the whole organization of the U.S. Senate. That as we're looking at the Senate right now, the Senate is not reflective of America. Here it is that 2 senators have the power to be able to hold up an agenda of millions of people of something that would actually prevent or impact the voting rights, free and fair access to the ballot of millions of people. So we actually have to rethink this entire political structure in a way that what does it lend itself to a pluralist society? What would lend itself to make sure that the democratic rights of people are not thwarted by a few people who have a different kind of agenda?
What happens if these 2 bills don't happen? I mean, for those who don't know, I'm sure everybody's been paying attention. The John Lewis Act would give the government the power to intervene when there are, to look at local election laws that may discriminate against people. And obviously the For the People Act makes national a whole bunch of standards around mail-in voting, early voting, voter ID. If they do not become law, LaTosha, what's the impact of that?
No, it's going to be devastating. As we speak, on yesterday, you know, part of the reason some of the groups didn't want to participate because they said we still have work to do. You know, as the speech was happening, there were groups that were working in Lincoln County, Georgia. In that county currently right now, the Republicans have put forth a proposal to close in a rural county where there's no public transportation available, to close every single polling site with the exception of 1, right? And so we're looking at these attacks in Fulton County, where I live, which is the most populous county in the state of Georgia. You know, there's an attempt right now for the Republicans to actually take over the election board. They've already started removing people from the election board so that they can actually undermine kind of the effectiveness of that. And then they've given themselves power with the SB 202 that was passed last year that actually helps them weaponize the administrative process and gives them power to actually even overturn results, to actually challenge the results. And so when we're looking at what's happening, what I think is going to happen, I think it's going to be exacerbated. I think we're going to even see it. The question even for me is that we need those 2 bills to stop the bleeding. But the truth of the matter is, it is so deeply embedded that this voter suppression has been so deeply embedded in the system right now. And what we're seeing as part of the strategies of Republicans, that we've got a lot of work to do. And even those 2 pieces of legislation are just going to be a start. We're going to have to do real reformation, political and reformation in this country.
I want to talk about that reformation, as you call it. But for those who have not been following, in addition to the Lincoln County and Fulton County stuff you're talking about, the one provision in the pre-existing law passed last year that I still can't get over, this is in Georgia, this is the provision most of you at home have heard about, which says it is illegal to provide food or water to somebody who is waiting in line to vote. It is just, it's incredible to me. You mentioned reform beyond just these 2 laws. I don't know if you saw David Brooks' piece in the New York Times. I half agreed with him. The half I didn't agree with, he says the Democrats have the wrong target, that these laws that you're fighting for, that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are fighting for, aren't addressing the most important issue. And this is the part where I do agree. Whether it's most important, it's at least as important. The Washington Post did a tally. You've probably seen this. and calculated there are 163 Republicans running for statewide office, election-related offices, who have embraced the big lie that the election was stolen in 2020, that Joe Biden is not the legitimate president of the United States. What is an organization like Black Voters Matter doing about the fact that if these people get in place, no matter what happens with these two voting rights bills, people are really screwed?
I mean, it's terrible. We can only do what's in the realm of what we have the power to do. And what we've been doing is there's kind of three approaches that we've been taking. One, we've actually been filing lawsuits. We have lawsuits filed in several states right now, including the state of Florida, that in many ways have been suggesting that they wanted to go so far to even have police officers to do oversight of drop boxes. In the state of Georgia right now, the legislative session just started. There's a bill right now to eliminate off-site voting altogether in the state of Georgia. When you're looking at, we're seeing this all across the country. I want people to understand this is not just about one bill or just about this legislative fight at this moment. We are literally talking about there is a concerted effort to undermine the entire infrastructure, the political infrastructure that would lend itself to making sure that politics is responding to the majority, what the needs are and the desires of the majority, to only a minority rule. So part of the things that we've been doing is we've been organizing, educating people in the streets. Two, we've been supporting those efforts in our C4 effort, been supporting those efforts and those candidates that can actually challenge these people who are seeking to get in office, and we're filing lawsuits. That's what we're calling upon this government. We're calling upon the president and the Congress for God's sake to do something to give us more protection so that as we're doing this work, we can be effective.
I said in the introduction to you, LaTosha, and I meant this literally, that you and a few other people have done more than anybody else to ensure that there was a Democratic majority in the Senate to begin with those two Georgia races and other races the Democrats won last year that many people thought they couldn't win. These local laws, the 19 states that have passed legislation trying to reduce the likelihood that people vote, are targeted, as you know better than anyone, at people of color, at low-income people, the exact same people you convinced to come out and vote for Biden and Harris and the Democrats in Congress. If the Democrats can't produce those extra votes, forget the Republicans in the Senate, and there are no protections on the federal law, what do those same people do when it's time for the midterm elections in 2022?
It's severely unfortunate, but what I think those same people will do, I think they will stay home. I think that part of what we see in this country, there has been a history of less than 50% of the population consistently vote in elections, right? And part of that has been, I think, deliberative, and some of that has been by design, that there has been an effort by a few who have maintained power to actually make the process where other people, like, literally don't participate in the process. They don't want people to participate. There's always been this three kind of fold strategy. I often talk about that. One is about creating a culture of fear, right? To actually create this culture of fear so people won't participate. Two is about restricting access to the ballot. And the third thing is weaponizing the administrative process by legalizing those things that will give you an advantage. And that's what we're seeing. I think that there's some people that will stay home, but I also think that my work has never been driven by putting a political party in power. My work is driven by, one, to reduce the harm to our community and make sure that we are part of the governing process of that is how real democracy is made. And so as tough and as terrible as things are now, believe it or not, Jim, I think that we have a remarkable opportunity. We have a remarkable opportunity to lean in, to get people engaged, to literally have people to take over this process and really create the kind of America that we all desire and we all deserve.
Okay, I'm so glad you said that, because I have to say, every time you're here, I'm usually feeling down about the state of democracy, and you never fail to make me feel better and more hopeful. Tell me why I shouldn't worry that, forget the midterms, forget these two laws, forget 2024. I worry that democracy as a whole is hanging by a thread in this country. Convince me why I shouldn't have that fear, LaTosha.
Well, I have two things. So one, I'm a native of Selma, Alabama. And so I often have to remind myself that there were 600 Black people in Selma, Alabama that got on a bridge that did not have government on their side. Matter of fact, they didn't have a lot of political capital. Neither party, the Dixiecrats or the Republicans at the time, were supporting them, right? They didn't have, matter of fact, they were met at the foot of that bridge, right, with dogs and billy clubs. Somehow those people that didn't have the political capital, didn't have a lot of resources, didn't have the kind of leverage that other people had, and many folks said it will never happen, including the president himself. What were they able to do? They were able to change the course of history because they stood on principle. And I have to remind myself that the way that even this country was founded, that when we look at things that have happened, it has always been the committed few that have stood in a space on principle and continue to engage in the move forward. That is really how transformation happens. That's how change happens. And in the midst of all of this that is happening around the democracy that we know and that we're familiar with, even at the expense of creating something new and stronger and more equitable and inclusive, that is what gives me hope. And what I am sure of, that is going to happen, because when people work together, we win.
That's what I was looking for. LaTosha Brown, good luck in your work. It's really good to see you. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Good to see you again. Yeah.